Welcome to the third professional development webinar hosted by Parks and Leisure Australia, Vic-Tas region. My name is Liam Cole and I'm a Regional Council member for PLA Vic-Tas and the Open Space Planner with Wellington Shire Council. I'll be your host this morning. But before we start, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. I pay my respects to their elders, past and present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today. With the increasing pressure on local government to move away from the use of glyphosate in public spaces, I would like to introduce Kim Bloor from Citywide and Dave Hart from Technigrow to outline an alternate system of managing weeds without the use of herbicides. But before I pass over to Kim, a couple of important housekeeping items about the webinar this morning. Kim and Dave will present for approximately 35 minutes, and then we'll have a Q&A session for 15 to 20 minutes. I ask you all to mute your microphones to stop any background noise. Questions and comments can be typed in the sidebar of the bottom right of your screen during the presentation, and we'll come back at the end of them. I will formally close the webinar just before 11 a.m, but if there are still some questions unanswered by this time, Kim and Dave will be happy to continue with the Q&A if you want to remain connected. Now sit back and wait to be informed about an alternative weed control in public places. Over to you now, Kim.
Okay, thank you for that, Liam. Good morning, everybody. Firstly, I'd like to say thank you to the PLA for providing us with the opportunity to discuss the utilisation of boiling water to control weeds, and for you, the members, taking time today to listen to us and becoming involved. This is the first time I've actually presented like this, so hopefully it runs fairly smoothly. So a bit about me. My name's Kim Bloor and I'm the General Manager at Citywide Service Solutions. I'm accountable for the ACT, New South Wales and Queensland. In Queensland, I also oversee a business called Technigrow, which was purchased by Citywide about 5 years ago. So Technigrow, a bit about Technigrow. Technigrow was established in 1987 by my brother Nick Bloor, who I joined in 1989. Our aspiration and goal at the time was to improve the way in which weed control, mainly in urban areas, was being carried out, which at the time, back then in our eyes, was extremely poor. As a family business, we spend an enormous amount of time and money on R&D, looking for ways to reduce chemical usage, and also in the way which was applied in the areas we operate, which include natural areas, turf, parks and gardens, and road networks. We actually had at the time a full-time R&D team and a considerable budget. As I mentioned, we specialise in urban weed control for over 30 years, and we've seen enormous changes and challenges throughout this time. We carry out large-scale weed control for nearly all local and state authorities in South East Queensland and currently hold the road network weed control contract for Brisbane City Council, where we complete in excess of 90,000 kilometres of roads per year. We were the pioneers of shielded, non-drift-proof weed control for turf spraying, which is the picture in the middle of the screen, and also for the safety cell, which we believe to be the safest vehicle-mounted spraying unit available anywhere in Australia, if not the world, and a recent recipient of the Victorian Road Safety Awards. The safety cell, we'll talk more about that quickly later. That's a picture of it on the left-hand side of the screen. As you would be aware, over the years, especially the last couple of years, weed control using herbicides has become a huge topic and extremely sensitive, especially in urban areas. We've continued to look for safer solutions to reduce the amount and types of herbicides we're using while still achieving a good result for our clients, and this has become challenging. We look very closely at what is happening overseas in regards to legislation and what equipment was being successfully utilised, and found what we believe to be the most effective alternative to herbicides anywhere in the world, which is boiling water, not steam. So I was then fortunate enough to go to Europe and review the equipment being extensively utilised, which is manufactured by a company called Heatweed. I spent considerable time with both the manufacturer and contractors who are using the Heatweed equipment, looking at both the quality of the equipment and the results that were being achieved throughout Europe. And what I found, I believe to be amazing. My only real concern was, could we achieve the same results with boiling water in the warmer climates of Australia? So my CEO and board backed my enthusiasm and approved for Citywide to purchase considerable amount of equipment and bring it back to Australia, which is what we did. They also approved for us to bring the experts from Europe. We brought out 3 individuals and train our staff back in Australia, which took approximately 1 week. The equipment that we purchased was the Mid 3 and the Sensor 2 series. So we'll talk more about those. The Mid is in the center of the screen, the Sensor on the right hand of the screen, and over on the left hand screen shows a picture there of our staff being trained by the people in Europe. So talk about the Mid 3. So the Mid 3 is a really well manufactured, compact and reliable piece of equipment. It can be mounted on trucks, trailers, utes, some ATVs. It has up to a 45-metre hose. It has advanced temperature control, which makes sure that the water always remains above 98 degrees Celsius and produces excellent results and is very, very safe to use. The other piece of equipment that we bought is the Sensor 2, which is on the screen now. So the Sensor 2 is the larger unit. It's our flagship. The equipment is really, really well manufactured. It has patented sensor technology, which locates even the smallest of weeds and applies boiling water at 98 degrees Celsius directly onto the targeted weed. It's extremely safe and efficient and very, very well received by the general public. So after extensive training by the Heatweed staff back in Australia, we were ready to commence our trial work under Australian conditions. So we completed extensive trial work in parks and gardens, playgrounds, water-sensitive urban design areas, hard standing areas and road networks. And I mean, what I was really concerned about was I was very, very excited about the equipment. Again, would we achieve the same results that I saw in Europe? And I can honestly say the results we were achieving were definitely up to the expectations of myself and my staff and our clients, including Gold Coast City Council, Sunshine Coast Council, SEQ Water, just to name a few. And I clearly remember the first time we actually went out and we did this trial work, the smiles on the staff of my face. I mean, we'd really nailed it. We didn't miss a weed and we got 100% result. And if you look at the pictures on the screen there, where you see the water applied is only in weeds, on weeds. So we didn't miss anything and we got 100% result. So what I'd like to do now is just show you a quick video. It goes for about 3 minutes of the equipment working. Once I've done that, I'll then hand over to Dave Hart, and Dave Hart has got a wealth of knowledge and experience in weed control in urban areas. So just sit back and I'll get the video happening. Road network weed control is a service that we provide. Treating weeds on road networks is very difficult work. Not only the fact, I suppose, that we're working around moving traffic all the time, we're also applying products in areas that people work and play. Our reporting and our data collection is critical. We know exactly where our staff have been, what roads have been treated, what products have been used.
Providing them with the data that we do allows them to know how we're performing. That gives them, that gives them options in the future so that they better understand the work that we do.
we found what we believe to be the safest non-chemical weed control solution available anywhere in the world, which is boiling water, not steam but boiling water.
Using hot water to kill weeds, that's just got win all over it for the environment and for the people that are organising the work, ordering the work.
Climate change, drought, weather conditions, huge problem for our customers. We'll always go for a safer product, looking at ways to reduce our overall output of products.
Our customers are valuing the offer of the hot water weed control because it gives them options, it gives them the capacity to meet problems as they arise.
Taking away risk to our customers is very important. We've spent a lot of time working with the industry's best to make sure that we're a step ahead. We were closely involved in the innovation around building the safety cell. The safety cell is a vehicle that keeps our staff extremely safe when working on roads.
Customers are always looking for better ways of doing things, safer ways of doing things. It is about having the full suite of tools.
Weed control on road networks is a really, really important service that must be provided. At the end of the day, trying to give our customers the best result and with the safest outcome at all times.
Hi, good morning everybody. As Kim said, I'm Dave Hart and I've been with Citywide for 17 years and for the last 10 or so as a leader of what we call our landscape and roads division. We provide services in most areas of veg maintenance, but where we've traditionally tried to focus is the area of urban weed control and parks and road networks. And that's probably where we're best known and where we consider ourselves to be one of the best, if not the best. One of the main contracts I run and that we've successfully held for many years is as the supplier of herbicide application services to Brisbane City Council. This contract involves a significant quantity of work. In fact, if we joined all the spraying of work that we do, that's in curbside, channel and footpath that we conduct in 1 year, it would go around the world twice, in fact more than twice. Added to this, of course, is the thousands of hectares of weed control we complete in turf and gardens. A big part of my role in relation to this contract is dealing with complaints from the public, especially regarding chemical use. And we give our guys a handout sheet that explains what we're spraying, why we're spraying it, and should alleviate the concerns of residents. But if they've got a bee in their bonnet about chemical use, I end up getting a call anyway. And quite often those calls aren't pleasant to deal with. So I can say, as the guy at the forefront of one of the largest urban weed control contracts in the country, the public concern about chemical weed control is growing. It's getting worse. So at Citywide, we like to think of ourselves as being a pretty innovative bunch, and we're always looking for greater safety and efficiency in the way we deliver our services. And I'm quite fortunate that my team and I have been given some wonderful tools with which to achieve that. I'll just quickly touch on a couple of examples of those, if I may. Can mention them briefly before. That reflect that the attitude that we have in wanting to be innovators in our space. The first is this better kit. You saw it in video before. It's the safety cell. We've got a couple of these. They're Department of Main Roads approved, and we use these units to complete most of our work on both major arterial and minor residential roads. We've got them operating day and night, and they complete a huge quantity of work far more safely, far more efficiently than we otherwise could achieve it. And of course, that leads to savings that leaves our customers pretty happy as well. As you can see on the side, it's got two steel cells that the operator can stand in, one on either side of the vehicle. And from there, he can safely access the curb using either a boom or a lance or a gun. And the same on the other side, on the driver's side, where he can treat center mediums. And of course, center mediums are a dangerous place to be. So I'll just, another innovation that we're quite proud of is our drift-proof technology. Again, this is developed in-house for our use. It's got a super light footprint, uses very low quantities of water, and it allows us to selectively treat parks turf without any chemical drift far more safely and efficiently than we otherwise could. It gets a great public reaction, and it's a major tool for us. Another innovation that we've brought in recent years with the assistance of the clever people in our citywide IT department is a system you can see on the slides now, and you saw a little bit of it in video before. It's a clever combination of our field staff completing reports digitally, which then has selected pieces of data uploaded to what we call our customer portal. And the selection of that data depends on what the customer wants to know, because that data is then turned into some pretty clever reports. With this, our customers can see the progress that we have in our works. They can even see maps of what areas have been treated and what areas haven't been treating. And we also contain within this our forward planning. So not only does the customer have the ability to see what has been treated, you can see what's going to be treated and when it's going to be treated. And that's important because we encourage our customers to make sure that anybody that's answering the phone has access to this. That way, if a resident rings up with any sort of inquiry or complaint, for example, they might want to know when the weeds in their local playground are getting treated. They can quickly look at this, see when it was last treated, when it's next going to be treated as per the program. And that, of course, means that the resident making the phone call gets an answer immediately, and that always leaves them happier than being told that somebody's going to get back to them. Importantly, the portal also includes the data and mapping that supports our chemical sensitive objective management. It details the locations where chemical is not to be applied and the specific instructions for each site. That can vary from a resident's request that we simply advise them when we're in the area, or it could be the specific information related to that property, which could be an exclusion zone and the extent of that exclusion zone. One of the worst things we can do as a contractor or even council can do is spray a location where a resident has advised that they have a chemical sensitivity. That is just the absolute biggest no-no. So we make sure that we update this constantly and that our staff are completely aware of it. We've got it built into our systems that they cannot spray in an area where they're not supposed to, or have been advised that there's a sensitivity. A lot of the information actually comes through to me directly from our operators. So what I do is I'll get council approval to add them to the list, and then add them to the list myself. It's important to note that we don't make any type of judgment on our safe use of herbicides versus the claims of these people. We simply manage the system for them and then do our best to provide council with an alternative. And fortunately, that's now a lot easier. And so that brings us to our latest innovation, the heat weed equipment. Obviously, we didn't develop this. It's made by some very clever people overseas, but we are the ones that have brought it to Australia, and we're very proud of it. I've become increasingly impressed with this gear the more I use it, and by that I mean the more I worked with it, the more I've come to understand the importance of the factors that make it different to other similar available gear out there. We know there's other systems out there, but none of them gave us the confidence to invest in heavily as we have with this equipment. Two of the biggest standouts for us when we were investigating thermal weed control options were the sensor technology and the computerized temperature control this equipment has. The more we've looked into this area, the more we've realized how critical constant temperature control is, and the heat weed gear gives us that. Having this equipment now provides me with a strong sense of comfort in the knowledge that I now have an option that we can offer where chemical control is not possible. It eases a lot of the stress that's been building in our industry and with contractors since this public groundswell against chemical use started gaining momentum. Especially since In the past, we've trialed a lot of different things, a lot of compounds that had that organic tag, but really posed a significant risk to us or the environment, and generally didn't work anyway. So we've been searching for alternatives for many years, and it gives us a great deal of confidence to know that we've now got this. To the machinery itself, we purchased 2 different models. The first I'll talk about is the sensor. It as the name suggests, incorporates some clever sensor technology. It's a big piece of gear, and as you can see in the slide, we mount it on has to be mounted on a tractor unit. We've got ours on this flash holder unit. The way it works is, as the unit travels along the ground, the sensors detect the chlorophyll in the weed, and the dosing unit dispatches a measured quantity of water to the weed out of one of the nozzles. There's about 40 of them across the underside of the machine. We had to go through a lot of effort to get this machine working properly. It's got a lot of the designers built a huge range of options into the software. One is that the sensitivity of the sensors can be calibrated for detecting different quantities of chlorophyll in the weed. This is so that if the weed is in poor health, the machine doesn't waste water and then diesel and reheating water in treating it. The assumption they have there that if the weed is in poor health, it's probably on the way out anyway. In Australia, we know that hot, dry climate, our weeds are under stress anyway. So we run this on the maximum setting to pick up the slightest hint of chlorophyll and nail that weed, depending on whether it's healthy or under stress or whatever. Another was in relation to the quantity of water applied. Again, our weeds, they're tough. They're tough, and they're seemingly getting tougher each year as glyphosate, resistance gets worse. So we run it on the maximum water setting. But even with it set to maximum output like this, it's still using a lot less water than other machinery out there that's having to just do a constant blanket spray. This is only spraying where the weed is. So in total volume water used, it's using a lot less, even though we're putting a lot on the weed. If we want to, and we do use it like this occasionally, we can set it to continuous blanket spray, and that's something we might do in really messy paved areas. Fantastic for that. But generally, we let the sensors do their job and minimize the amount of water that we're using. The last thing we had to learn with this bit of gear was getting our speeds right, and that we've learned is critical. We've learned that the weed density and more importantly the maturity of the weed dictates the speed at which we can work. And this has come back to where we've given our operators plenty of time to get used to it, to learn how to use it, to gain the experience, and the operators are critical. They know where they can speed up, where they can slow down, what species of weed, what level of maturity the weed is, and get the best out of the machine productivity-wise. It's a really clever machine. The computer in this thing is amazing. The unit monitors how fast it's traveling, and then it knows the delay in opening the nozzles. So it always hits the weed. It can even tell when you're driving around a corner or going around a bend. If you're going around a corner, it knows the alignment of the machine, and it will turn on a different nozzle to the one in line with the sensor that picked up the weed, because it knows as you're turning the corner, it needs to use that other nozzle to hit it. So really, really clever. Constant temperature is super important with thermal weed control. It's something I just cannot stress enough. This is the point that matters most, more important than all the flashy sensor technology and the quality of the work, the machinery and all the rest of it. That stuff's important, don't get me wrong, it's important. But when it comes to thermal weed control, it's that constant temperature. And with this machine, the hot water within the dosing unit is continually circulating. It's circulating in a loop, and what the manufacturers call their active temperature control system decides when that loop needs to be interrupted and the water sent back through one of the 2 burners that the machine has. So that way it's constantly monitored, and we know that we're always hitting the weed with water at no less than 98.6 degrees temperature, and that's what gets us a result. We have a short a video that's pretty neat. It's coming up. It's of our mechanic Steve doing a test on the sensor and nozzle arrays. You can see in the video that he's got a piece of veg there, and as he waves it under the sensor, you'll see the different nozzles fire. We had to course, bypass some things in the software to trick the machine into thinking it was driving, but it was worthwhile. It's a pretty neat little piece of imagery. Oh, seems to be some difficulty in getting that video to come up. Okay, we might just have to skip that for now. Anyway, this next slide showing treated areas after the sensor unit has travelled over them. As you can see, it's got good reflexes and good aim. It also shows that despite the fact that we're running it at the maximum water setting, it uses a fraction of the water it would use if it didn't have the sensors and had to just blanket spray the whole area. When we first got the machine, we were super excited to use it, and that slide down on the bottom left corner, that's where we've gone out the front of the factory, and we only had clean new curbing channel and gutter to work with, so we ended up ripping some weeds out of a native's garden and throwing them out on the road in front of the machine. It was an exciting day, and as you can see, first time we used it, it nailed everything we threw out in front of it. The other type of machine we are using is called the Mid 3. This machine provides greater flexibility in the sensor unit, but does require a greater level of input from the operator. We've put ours on small trucks with a lot of storage space and a large water tank on board, but the machine itself is not that large. They have a range of hand tools for different jobs and allow a more targeted application for garden beds or anywhere that the big machines can't get into. We've got 15 meters of hose on a retractable reel. We can add more hose in 15-meter lengths, but every time we do add another hose, we've got to tell the machine, because it's so clever, it heats the water up a little bit more with each hose to account for the heat loss as the water goes out the hose to the tool. So again, this is a very clever machine, just like the sensor machine. The different tools vary in widths. Some have wheels, some don't. Wheels for working on curb and channel, without wheels for in garden beds. And it also has a pressure switch, a pressure variation that we can turn. When it's operating controlling weeds, it operates on a really low pressure. It's very safe. The hoses are of really good quality and the pressure is very low. But if we want to, we can turn it up into pressure washer mode, and we have a pressure washer lance that replaces the weed control tool. Changes very quickly at the flick of a switch. And we've been using that for cleaning bins and tables and barbecue surrounds, that sort of assets within parks. It does a really, really good job. It's important to note that it's not as high a pressure as you would get with a commercial pressure washer. It's the hot water that's doing the job, not the pressure. So the pressure is reduced on a high pressure washer, but more pressure than the weed control program permits. As well as getting into garden beds and playgrounds and other areas that the sensor can't get into, we use this machine for treating jobs where the quantity of work at each job is not great and the distance between them is great. So where we've got programs of work that contain places like roadside adjacent to sensitive objectives, or various cafes or shopping precincts, dining precincts, outside schools, outside childcares, and there's a fair distance between them, we use this equipment. The machinery itself, once you get to location, turn it on, heats up really quick. There's very little delay. Within seconds of pulling up, signs out, hose out, we're treating the weeds. Very quickly, once the job is done, roll it back up again, all the gear back into the truck, and we're off to the next location. And it's for those reasons that the guys working down on our inner West Sydney contract are using this machine exclusively for their work. Now, the big question with this gear is, does it work? And is it killing the weeds, including the roots? And I can say, yes, it does. But I need to qualify that. Where you use it in locations that have had had responsible weed control conducted at regular intervals in the past. We found it's a bit slower than chemical spraying, but not overly so. And it's pretty easy to get a good result. However, if the area's been neglected because spraying hasn't been permitted, then expect it to be slower. We've been given some really awful sites, and we found that while the follow-up treatments have become increasingly quicker, those first treatments haven't been fun, and that makes sense. We're effectively cooking the weed, and the volume of the material that we need to cook determines the treatment time. What we have learned is that whipping away, most of the top growth, coming back in a few days' time and treating that growing crown makes the process much quicker, much easier. There's a lot of science behind this. We've learned that hot water is far more effective at transferring energy than other forms of thermal weed control. The slide up there shows it now. Including steam. And look, don't include this with steam. Don't confuse this with steam weeding. It's not the same thing. That's one of the things that we've had to get clear with a lot of customers. It's not the same thing. This is hot water. We know that if we put enough hot water at the right temperature, we can destroy the cell structure of the plant, including the roots, and it will dry up and fall apart. And again, that temperature bit is so important. If the temperature drops by even a couple of degrees, we don't get the roots as well. That's why I keep mentioning how this gear consistently delivers that high temperature. The consistent high temperature is the secret to success. And of course, after having worked with it, we know that if we can destroy what's above the ground at the right temperature, and I mean, not just annoy it by burning it, but physically rip the cells open, we virtually always get the root as well. There's been some exceptions to this, and they've been weeds that in neglected sites where we've had to finish them off on the following treatment because they're just really big, hard weeds. And I'm talking about weeds here that the glyphosate would have struggled to get as well. So, I don't see that as a big problem. A couple of benefits that we found with this gear that we're loving, the results are really quick, really quick. Most times the weeds are dead the next day or the following day. Go back a week later, 10 days later, and you can't find them. They're just gone. They're falling apart and blown away. And that's great because we know standing tall weeds trigger complaints. Sometimes more complaints than green weeds do. So that's again is a lessening of complaints. We've also noticed an improvement in the health of desirable plants in the gardens we treat. We were given some awful gardens to work in. And one of the things we noticed in a lot of these gardens was that they showed a lot of damage that obviously had some clumsy glyphosate or other chemical applications in them, and there was a lot of missing plants, with a lot of damage to the plants that were there. Since we've been treating these gardens with the hot water, they're picking up. They're looking fantastic, way better than they were before. And we're putting that down to the fact that there's just zero chemical drift in there. They look fantastic. And lastly is the results we're getting on glyphosate resistant and tolerant weeds. We're killing things like fleabane and pigweed without a problem. Whereas in the past, they and a number of other nasty weeds, required some pretty aggressive chemistry that just wasn't suited to public spaces to control them. And of course, when you're working on roads, roads are drains. They lead to other drains, which lead to waterways, which, you've got to be careful about what you're putting on those. So, often you can't use those other chemistries to control those harder weeds. And I've noticed over the years, problems, these weeds are becoming more prevalent. And weeds that a few years ago were a problem, like crow's foot or wiregrass in our gutters, they're getting harder to kill as well. It's just... it's getting harder and harder with chemicals to get the job done. And this system just nails everything. It doesn't care whether it's weed resistant or not. If it's got chlorophyll and it can, cook the cell structure, it'll kill them. So, we've got some results on the screen. On the current slide, the top right, that's fleabane 24 hours after treatment. Now, this is a location on Gold Coast that I was given down at the Botanical Gardens, where they were having a lot of trouble. It's actually like a mulch storage area. And I hit that when I was first given the equipment. It was an area that I was allowed to play with. And that's actually fleabane. So you can see on the left there, we've nailed the fleabane, and that's a day after I did it. Go back a week later, and it's just falling apart. To make that more impressive, this particular area is one that my customer had been doing a lot of spraying with glyphosate and just couldn't get a result, just couldn't kill the stuff, and we killed it easily. The two shots on the left, they're of a simple curb and footpath area. We've been doing a lot of this. These particular ones are up on the Sunshine Coast. This was part of a program of CBDs that we were given by Sunshine Coast Council. We actually did a lot of this work at night. The equipment is quite is not noisy, it's not loud, so we were quite easily able to get up into these locations. You can see in the background there's an apartment building. Zero complaints. Initially, they put us on a fairly high frequency with this work, but it just proved not to be necessary. We had to go to the customer and say, look, push the program out more. We just don't need to go back. There's nothing there. And the three on the bottom there, well, that's in what we would call a wusset, or you might know down south as a rain garden. The shot in the middle is before treatment. The shot on the left is immediately after treatment. You can see how the vegetation's all flat, and that's what we're looking for when we're treating. We're looking to flatten that vegetation down. We basically know that we can make it fall over on top. We've killed what's under the ground, and that's a good guide for our operators when we're working. And of course, the one over on the other side, that's on the right hand side, that was I think it was about like a week later or something like that. You can see there's not much left. What is left is desiccated and not a visual problem at all. To the next slide, that area on the left, that's a part of a local dam here on the Gold Coast. Beautiful site. That's right on top of the dam wall. A very enjoyable job, as you can see. No problem nailing that, and the equipment really excels at this type of work. And that one on the right's an interesting shot, because that's that particular section of road we know for a fact had not been treated in over 6 months. Some terrible weeds in there, and I think that's about 10 days later. I actually returned to this site maybe half a dozen times waiting for the weeds to come back, and I've given up. They're not coming back. They're nailed. They're absolutely nailed, and I'm just wrapped with the results that we're getting from this work. Look, thank you for listening. I hope it's been informative, and I'll hand you back to Kim.
Yeah, thanks for that, Dave. We think we got the little video working. It goes for a few seconds showing you the sensors working. So we just try to play that quickly now. Yeah, that's just some video he took. Is the mechanic just putting a small weed under the sensors, moving it from side to side, and showing you how the sensors pick up the weed, and very, very accurate. Again, thanks for that, Dave. So finally, we're running out of time here. So finally, I'd just like to discuss briefly about a contract that we're recently awarded for Inner West Council in Sydney for 5 years. So the contract is for sensitive weed control in sensitive areas. And it was very interesting for us to see this contract come out, because I was a bit unsure of how council would approach the reduction of herbicides. And I believe that what Inner West have done with this contract is definitely a step in the right direction. So the contract that we do there is we treat commercial areas, town centre areas, out front of the childcare centres and schools, playgrounds, sensitive ejector areas, and water sensitive urban design or rain gardens. So the contract, we actually treat this 6 times a year. We do an application every second month, and I must say the results have been very, very positive, and the customer is very, very happy with the results. So good contract, and I give Inner West 10 out of 10 for the way they've approached this. That's all I've really got now. So I just quickly like to say thank you again to everyone for their time today. Thank you for the PLA for organising today. It has been really good, so I appreciate it. So I'll just hand back now to Liam, and for any questions and answers we may have.
Thanks, Kim and Dave. It's been very informative, that's for sure. I see that there's a number of questions, and I encourage you, if you've got any questions, to post them over in the chat, but we'll head over and have a look at them. We've got, if you bear with me for a second, Jeremy mentioned your boiling water. Boiling's at 100 degrees Celsius, but you kept saying 98. Is there a reason why it's not 100 degrees, or?
Oh, look, quite frankly, 98 is the minimum that the computers will allow this machinery to put the water out. We know that 98 is sufficient. 98.6 is actually what the machine's calibrated to do. We say 98, but it's 98.6. We know that at 98 and above, we're going to get the desired results. So that's the fail-safe. The machine won't allow us to get the water at less than 98, and that's why when we add the extra length of hose on the mid-3, it increases the temperature to which it's heating the water. I believe that the highest point that with 2 hoses on, that it's getting to 107 degrees before it's coming out, before it's leaving the machine. But of course, it's less than that when it comes out the tool, having traveled through 30 meters of hose, but it is in excess of 98. And we have a little trick with the mid-3, which is kind of cool. When you put hot water like that through a hose and then out an application tool at the end, we get what we call crackle, and it's a bubbling of the water, and it makes a noise as it's coming out. That's the water basically expanding as it hits the atmosphere. So we can tell very quickly when we're at temperature, and that's what we do when we pull up at a site, turn the machine on, we wait. It takes about 20 seconds or so, and then once we get what is that obvious crackle, we start working. If we lose crackle for any reason, that would indicate a fault in the machine. But we call it crackle, but it's what it essentially means is minimum 98 degrees coming out of the end of that tool.
So a follow-up question to that one, and from Jeremy again, was what temperature does the burner heat the water to achieve that 98 degree?
Yeah, again, varies, mate. As I said just before, it depends on the length of hose, and that's why we have to tell the machine. If it's working on 15 meters of hose, it'll go to a certain temperature. But if we put an extension on, and we tell the machine that we've put an extension on, then it heats it to further. And I believe that the second hose takes it to 107. I apologize for not knowing that off the top of my head, but what matters is when it comes out the end of that tool, it's at least 98, and that's the critical factor.
Yep. From Mark Corrier at the City of Moreland here in Melbourne, is there any option for biofuels instead of diesel for the burners?
Not in my machines, thank you.
Can you explain why that is?
Look, I would obviously need to clear that with the manufacturers. This is some pretty space age kit we got here. It's not something that's been knocked up in a garage. It's expensive equipment. We've spent a lot of money on it. I want it to last forever. I love the stuff, and I'd have to be pretty happy before I go putting an alternative fuel through it. The burners are the best you can possibly get on the market. Everything on these machines, even the off-shelf stuff, is top-shelf stuff. And I'd have to be very, very confident that I wasn't going to be damaging my burners if I was to put alternative fuels through them. Probably work fine. I'm not trying it.
So, and this is a question I'm posing. With steam, there's the concern that it just absolutely nukes the soil profile. Have you found anything like that with the use of hot water? Does it absolutely kill anything in the soil, or
no, and I think you've got to take that. You've got to look at a little bit of science behind that. Certain seeds, certain compounds can be neutralized with certain temperatures. This in the water application, it loses temperature very quickly, and that's where you've got to be careful with all thermal applications, that you might have something that's coming out of an applicator at a certain temperature, and then by the time it hits the plant or the soil or whatever, it decreases temperature very quickly. And that's why even when we're using the J-wands on our mid-3, we make sure that we're right down there on top of the crown, and that we're getting immediate contact as soon as it's coming out of the applicator. I know that in my first day or two's work, I didn't get a result. I couldn't work out why. And then I realized it was because I was holding the applicator too high, and the water had cooled sufficiently, and that inch or two it took to hit the weed, that it made it go brown, but a week later it came back green again. That's how quickly it loses temperature. It's really fast. And the same thing with steam. You shoot steam out of a nozzle too far away from the plant, you're not going to get a result. You've got to get that nice and close because steam loses temperature just as quicker. I've actually seen some video of this, and I've done it, and I've shown people water down on the hot on the concrete, and within inches of the machine, I've put my hand in the water, and it's warm, but it's not boiling anymore. You know, it's not harming anything. It's just warm water. You can do a paved surface. People can walk behind you in bare feet, no problem at all. So so the heat dissipates really quickly, and that's why the transference of heat is so critical. You've got a split second. Get that water in there, and a split second later, it's no good.
So that probably leads to the next question from Alistair Hazeldine, I believe, from Tassie. What are the WHS considerations when using the heatwave technology for the operator and the public?
Okay, well, yeah, just a small correction. It's heat weed technology. Gloves, we make our guys wear glasses as well. The hose, it's really quality construction, high quality construction. The hose that's on this gear is so far overkill, it's not funny. It's the highest possible quality, and that's one of the things that attracted us to it. The attention to detail, the quality of the parts is fantastic. You're not going to split this hose open. Just for a little bit of feel-good factor, we've actually surrounded our hoses with the type of plastic sheathing you see around hydraulic hoses. As an extra protection. And we also have that as a bit of wear protection, and it's a bit of a guide for us. We can see that if that plastic surround starts to get worn, that we can replace that before we start to wear the hose itself. So we don't have to worry about any little pinpricks. Of course, it's operating under very light pressure, so even if a hose or a fitting was to break, it's not going to spray around like a spray unit would if it developed a leak. PPE, gloves. We wear glasses, but that's just standard for anything, and the normal sun protections. But really, you're not needing any face masks. You're not needing the P2s. No chemical protection gear. PPE is really easy. It's a pleasure to work with, to be honest.
Okay. From Stuart, can you add more than 2 hoses to the mid 3 to make it a longer reach?
Yes, you can go up to 45 metres.
Okay, nice and easy one. There is a download, everyone. Above the typing bar, I believe there's a product download from Citywide Technigrow. So feel free to download it and read about it. Dave Richardson, I believe, down at East Gippsland, has asked a question. It might not be able to be answered, but the cost of the equipment. Confidence. No, need to turn your mic on, Tim.
Yeah, I can't tell exactly what it costs. It costs us a lot of money. Yep. A lot of money, but it's quality equipment, and we're a contractor, so we're obviously not selling the equipment as such at the moment. So we're a contractor. There was too a question about area of operation. I mean, we talked a lot about Technigrow today. Technigrow is a Queensland-based company, but we are owned by Citywide Service Solutions. We have units in Victoria. We have units in New South Wales. We have ample spares, ample equipment at our disposal. And at the moment, we are currently training staff in Victoria. There is actually already a team in Victoria utilising the equipment. And, so we operate down the whole eastern seaboard.
Are you able to share where they're operating so that within our network, whether we can contact, say it was City of Moreland or even Wellington Shire, which they're not, by the way, but where we could...
anywhere in Victoria, we would be keen to talk to people.
All right.
Anyway, I must admit we haven't been over to Tassie, but I'm open. Yeah.
I think that's all the questions that have been posted at this stage. One from me, the little single operator unit, how long do you get out of a tank of water in that?
Tank of water, if you were to run the machine continuously, so just don't turn it off ever, It'll run constantly for about 2 hours.
Okay.
Um,
A day's operation to like a day's normal operation.
Oh yeah, so the guys down in Sydney, a tank's getting them through. You know, a tank at a bit, maybe a day, depending on what they're doing. If they're on one of their shopping centre runs, that's a lot of major road work. They could use a bit more. Water gardens, they can use a bit more. Sites that you've been to, they're relatively under control, and you've got to weed every 2 or 3 meters or so. You know, it's a bit different as well.
Yep. From Mark Corrier, another couple of questions have popped up. Curious about the regime frequency for treatment for roadside and suburban areas. Do you require repeat treatments? What sort of intervals between treatments?
It was.
I'll comment on that. We're just Western Sydney Inner West contract every 2 months. So 6 times a year, every 2 months, and that is on a road. Now, I mean, even with our herbicide spraying, you know, we're doing glyphosate treatments where we do need to do them on a minor road 4 times a year, a major road 6 times a year. This would be very close to about the same. But you know, I'm being brutally honest here. We've only been using the equipment since just before Christmas. Done a bucket load of trial work, but you know, we may have to do an extra application versus a herbicide, but we are not certain yet. So 6 times a year.
So that's still good rates.
Yeah.
So it doesn't impede too much.
No.
I don't think there's any further questions popping up. I'm just going quickly back through to make sure that we've answered all of the questions. Yeah, there doesn't appear to be too many. So if that's it from everyone, I will sign off. So thank you to Kim and Dave and to all the participants this morning. We had close to 30 attendees. It is, of course, being recorded and will be shared out. So if people weren't able to make it that you'd like them to see, please feel free to share the video. I'd also like to acknowledge the work of Isaac from Technigrow as well, I believe, who's organised the presentations and the IT in the background today. So thanks to Isaac. As I said, there's the innovative weed management solutions brochure for downloading. I encourage everyone to download that and have a look. So before I say goodbye, I'd like to acknowledge and thank the VicTas region sponsors, SportEng, Christie, Lark Industry, Syngenta, Glascott Landscape and Civil, and the Victorian State Government for supporting our industry even throughout these trying times. So thanks again, Kim and Dave. Very informative session.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, guys.